Welcome to Literary Views. I'm your host, Nick Tettle, and today we'll be teaching Frankenstein as a work of criticism. So what is Frankenstein? Frankenstein is an 1818 novel by Mary Shelley that follows the life of Victor Frankenstein. Victor is a committed science student who assembled a living being from stolen body parts. Despite being innocent at first, the creature he creates turns to evil and seeks revenge upon his creator. Mary Shelley lets the reader create questions pertaining to the contents of the novel. These questions include, what does it mean to be human? What responsibilities do we have to each other? How far can we go tampering with nature? Let's go to Alex and Bracken to discover the answers to these questions.
So what do you think it means to be human, Bracken?
Humans are magnificent creatures that can do many things, but there are some things that were never meant for humans to have the ability to do. For instance, the creation of new life.
That sounds very familiar. Victor's curiosity pertaining to normal human limits are tampered with, which ultimately leads to his creation of a monster. The creation develops our questioning to whether science is a good or harmful aspect to the nature of humanity.
Victor wanted to be a pioneer for new science, making new discoveries, but when he goes too far, it all goes wrong.
What was going on during the time that made Mary Shelley write it the way she did?
The history of science dates way back, but in 1818, the discovery of creating new life was a complete mystery. Writing the novel with a sense of mystery captures the knowledge people had.
So, Bracken, what you're pretty much saying is that Frankenstein was published with the intention of showing that the history of science and the lack of knowledge we had on creating new life, so there was practically nothing. Now let's go to Nick and the author, Mary Shelley, to explain Frankenstein's true meaning.
Help me welcome Mary Shelley, the writer of Frankenstein. Could you tell us about your life?
Well, I was born in 1797 in London to my parents Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin. My mother died 11 days after I was born, and my father raised me by hand. The death of my son and continuous miscarriages impacted my life in multiple ways. These life experiences were the influence that helped me develop the characters in my story. I wrote Frankenstein at the age of 18 with intentions of winning a contest. Frankenstein was inspired by a dream that I had. The dream instilled in me the idea of fear and misery. I wanted the readers to create the same ideas based on how the creature is depicted.
Now let's dive into some important aspects that went into the book. So Gothic literature is defined as a style of writing that is characterized by elements of fear, horror, death, and gloom, as well as romantic elements such as nature, individuality, and very high emotion. These emotions can include fear and suspense.
Gothic literature got its start just 50 years before I published Frankenstein, and it was a huge part of my book. I included elements such as fear, horror, nature, and individuality in my novel to add the depth to my characters and to draw attention to the story.
Interesting. Can you give us some examples of some of those elements?
Of course, if you look at page 169 of my book, you will see that this is where Victor decides to marry Elizabeth, which is an example of romantic element. If you look at the page 173, you will see elements of fear and horror because Elizabeth dies.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you on our show.
Thanks for having me.
To help us understand Frankenstein better, we are going to roll the clip of me interviewing Cohen, the creator of monster theory. How is Frankenstein categorized into the first thesis?
Well, the first thesis is easily categorized because the creature's body incorporates fear, desire, anxiety, and fantasy. So in Frankenstein, if you turn to page 51, you'll find multiple examples pertaining to the first thesis in monster theory.
Throughout the story, I noticed that the fifth thesis was quite the challenge to categorize. How did you interpret it?
Well, I'd agree the fifth thesis was the hardest to categorize because the creature does control Victor's life in some way. But still, it allows him to have his own choices. So if you go to page 149 in the book, you will find that it is very prominent that the creature is hard to understand.
I thought the sixth thesis was one of the more important aspects to the story. Do you agree?
Yes, the sixth thesis was an overarching element to the story because the creature's desire to learn and to become intellectual made him believe that he would be accepted into society.
Thank you for joining us on Literary Views. Cohen, it was a pleasure to learn about your theories.
It was a pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Now we will send you to Bracken and Alex for an exclusive look into the characterization of Frankenstein.
There are 6 main characters we would like to highlight, showing each person's characterization. The first character we are going to talk about is Victor Frankenstein. How do you think Shelley characterizes Victor?
Well, I think Victor, the main character, is a bright guy who is interested and curious about the secrets of nature. He discovered the ability to create new life in his monster and make some poor decisions with his discoveries. His decisions made him miserable the rest of his life, trying to undo what he had.
Very good. Now let's talk about what Victor created exactly. Victor's creature is originally a misunderstood character. He begins his life in utter confusion, being accepted by no one. He begins to understand what he had to do after he was rejected by a family called his protectors, and swore eternal revenge upon his...
Another important character in Frankenstein would be Victor's sister Elizabeth. She was a beautiful girl adopted by the Frankenstein family, and she instantly becomes the favorite. Elizabeth was a very motherly character and can be compared to Caroline Frankenstein, Victor's mother. She was the only girl in the family after the death of Caroline, so she took care of all the little ones.
Victor has 2 friends we know about, Henry Clerval and Robert Walton. Clerval is Victor's best friend. He was interested in poetry and heroic adventure. Clerval was a very good friend because when Victor got very sick from isolation, Henry went to take care of him until he was back to full health. Henry's acts of kindness to Victor actually got him killed because of Victor.
Well, Victor didn't know Walton very long, but he was called a friend. Walton becomes a partially prominent character in the end of Frankenstein, considering he begins and ends the story with the letters. In the end, Walton rescues Victor and attempts to nurse him back to health. Walton is one of the very few people who ends up talking to the creature.
That's it for characterization. Let's take a quick look at what Nick has for the symbols of the book.
There are 5 concise key symbols that are found in Frankenstein. Throughout the book, the creature is oftentimes related to Satan. Bad weather is oftentimes foreshadows that a bad event is about to occur. Curiosity has a major impact on the character developments of Victor and the creature. Beauty is used to describe the scenery that the creature and Victor witness. And finally, Victor's family has multiple misfortunes as the story progresses. Now we will go back to Brighton to summarize the overall theme of Frankenstein.
Let's get into the theme of Frankenstein. The theme of Frankenstein is knowledge is power, but power is responsibility. Knowledge is power for the creature. If the creature never learned from observing the society, he would have never developed a curiosity for human nature. By learning how the society worked, he decided to try to fit in and began to hope that if he became intellectually stimulated, then he would be widely accepted by the people. Knowledge, in this case, had the opposite effect and gave the creature a sense of power. Since the creature had to deal with numerous occasions of isolation and loneliness, the once innocent creature results to evil and unleashes revenge upon its creator. Now that we have identified the theme for Frankenstein, we would like to conclude with an exclusive interview with Alex and his guest, Robert Stevenson.
Everybody, help me welcome Robert Stevenson, the author of the 1880s story Jekyll and Hyde.
Thanks for having me on Literary Views. What did you have in mind to talk about today?
So what I have to talk about today is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Have you ever even heard of it?
Well, yes. You see, many people believe that my book was heavily influenced by Shelley's work of art.
Do you have any examples of how Jekyll and Hyde and Frankenstein are the same?
Well, people argue that I manipulated Shelley's characterization skills and made Jekyll and Hyde the same person to show that the creator is always a monster in stories like these.
So I was thinking about it, in stories like these, after I read your book and Shelley's book, I wanted to point out a comparison that I found in the relationship between Jekyll and Hyde and Victor and his creature. So on page 81 in Shelley's book, the monster is very depressed and contemplates suicide. And also on page 128, Victor feels depressed and thinks of throwing his life away like it's nothing. This mental comparison between Victor and the monster seemed present between Jekyll and Hyde as well. Also, Dr. Jekyll is an accredited scientist for his good work, much like Victor Frankenstein, and they both create a monster that leads to their greatest failures. Do you think that these connections are strong enough to say that Mary Shelley's book influenced your work?
I cannot say for certain that Mary Shelley made me write Jekyll and Hyde the way I did, but these comparisons of Gothic literature are very good and tells me that you are looking into the deeper message of literature.
Thank you very much, Robert. Until next time, we'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning into Literary Views. We hope you gained a better understanding of how Frankenstein is a work of Gothism. Until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out our description box below to do further reading on Frankenstein.